Absolutely. And I'd say it's not just, here's your personalized learning development journey. It'd be great if you had that. But actually, and I've seen this with senior partners, they're hiring the same type of people as well, right? So actually, if you think about team formation, actually, if you're hiring the same type of people in the same team, what are you expecting? If you're all quite dominant people and you're hiring dominant people going forward and they're not all on the same page in terms of results, potentially you're going to create friction and conflict in the future and there'll be at loggerheads. And I think if we go back to the question of, well, where does it start? If you're a CEO and you're listening to this right now, it starts with you. Get an executive coach or someone that can help create insight or just create that space for you to reflect, because then you're going to see the value in it. And then you can then pass that gift onto your next line of leaders and then on. So help create that insight. People see how useful it is, and then you can start developing those skills internally. So you've got that ripple effect.
If you've ever launched a global L&D strategy that looked perfect on paper, but fizzled out across borders and cultures, this conversation is for you. Welcome to Unlocking Intercultural Agility. I'm Marco Blankenburg, International Director of KnowledgeWorks. For over 25 years, I've worked with leaders in more than 70 countries, helping them navigate the cultural complexity of today's global workplace. This podcast is for leaders, HR professionals, and global teams who want to strengthen relationships and succeed across cultures. In each episode, we speak with skilled professionals from around the world about what actually works when it comes to leadership, culture, and behavioral change. Today, building on part 1, Nicole and I define L&D excellence, aligning strategy with behavioral metrics, hiring for cultural fit, fostering coaching cultures, and practical steps for intercultural return on investment. Well, we've explored a lot of the challenges that we're faced with when it comes to L&D and strategically contributing to the organization. So let's get into the nitty-gritty a bit more and let's explore what can we do. But also, I want to give you permission to also share that from the negative side. So if something didn't work, that can really allude to or help us understand what we then need to do to avoid that from happening. Now, I want to pick up on something you said in our first episode when we started talking about this, and that was to do with the disconnect or the not being allowed to be at the table as an L&D practitioner. And you shared a little bit of a story there already, but what happens if you're not allowed to be at the table? Do you have actually a practical example of that?
Unfortunately, I think I've probably got more examples of not being at the table or allowed in the door than I do being allowed. If you're not allowed, or there's quite a hierarchical avenue in terms of who you speak to, it really creates a complete disconnect with what you're trying to deliver and what the company wants. I've got really recent examples of that as well, especially in really extremely hierarchical companies. I've had situations where I've literally not been allowed or told I can go and talk to the person that I need to. And so questions get diluted or asked through a second person. So they're not necessarily asking the questions that I need because they don't fully understand what I'm looking for. They're not a true sort of L&D professional. So then when you're trying to create interventions, leadership programs, roll out technology systems, it's not meeting the requirements that the company really needs because there are blockers in place. And some of that it can be from tradition. Right? It may not be necessarily that person's fault, but it's, this is the way we've always done it, right? Which is something I've heard so much before. Unfortunately, I've been in the position where even as a woman or the country that I've come from, because I am so different to everyone that was around the table, I think there was a sense of not being comfortable with asking or allowing me to come to the table to ask those questions because they've never done it before.
And automatically then your questions become difficult for them. because they've never done it before, but they've also probably never had somebody at the table asking those questions.
Yeah, or someone like me as well, right?
Yeah.
So especially if, I'm sorry to say that, you know, a lot of companies I've worked at, it's men, right? Yeah. There's a lot of men around the table. There's few women. Generation is another thing, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of prejudice that unfortunately just naturally comes with some of these aspects. And if I wanted to ask those difficult questions, because they haven't been challenged in that way before, or someone's asked those difficult questions, they can become quite defensive. And sometimes because of the nature of the questions, or I'm asking those difficult questions, and they don't know the answers, they feel quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are quite open to that, going, gosh, I've never thought of that aspect before. That's, wow, thank you for that insight, or asking those questions.
Yeah.
Other people have shut me out and not wanted me to be at that table in the future. So I've had situations where it's worked and situations where it hasn't. And sometimes it's just really difficult to break down those walls and build bridges. And it depends on how accepting and vulnerable and culturally agile some of those people are that I'm talking to.
Yeah. So you have cultural issues, but you also have hierarchical issues, gender issues, political issues that you're going to be dealing with in the organization. So let's flip it. Let's say you have, a CEO and their executive team who are super open, just so that our listeners can really walk away with some practical things. So let's say you have that CEO who's willing, and you have that beautiful opportunity to ask every question you want. What are some of the key questions that you as an L&D practitioner need to get answers to, so that you can start crafting a strategy aligned with the overall strategy?
Great question. And to be honest, I can think of really only one instance in my whole career where I've really had that deep kind of conversation with a CEO. And it was a man, but he allowed me that space and the psychological safety to ask me those questions. He's like, what do you want to know? I was like, well, tell me the challenges that you're facing right now. And it goes back to what we were talking about in the previous episode.
Yeah.
What's keeping you awake at night? Right? As a human being with a business, a lot of the times I'm now in charge of paying people every single month. Yeah. That's a pretty scary notion. So, you've got to make sure that revenue and sales are coming in. I'm responsible, for keeping a roof over people's heads. Yeah. Those are the types of things that are keeping people awake at night. But if you allow that opportunity, as a leader, allow the opportunity for people to ask you, what's really challenging right now? Where are the risks? Do a SWOT analysis. Yeah. What are those strengths? What are those weaknesses, opportunities? Where do you see yourself in 1 year's time, or where do you want to be? What stands in the way of you getting there? Yeah. And they may go, well, do you know what? We haven't got the right people in place to help us get there right now, or we haven't got the right skills or attitudes or behaviors. That's what we need to change. Yeah. And it's either we've got to develop those skills, or if they're not willing to develop those skills, we've got to hire people with those skills as well. So it's creating space and allowing that opportunity to have really deep conversations, and then you can steer the ship where you want to go.
At the same time, you do need to get into the granular details. Yeah. That might not be the conversation to have with the CEO, but if the CEO is with you, then how do you take this further? Because ultimately, you do need to have all of that data gathered, that understanding, before you can craft a proper L&D strategy. Yeah.
Well, I think see how deep the CEO can go on certain aspects, right? But I think, especially in the part of the world that we live in as well, but actually talking to the CEO or the most senior person, if they go, do you know what, I don't know the answer for that, and actually it's okay that they don't know. Leaders don't know everything. No. But they say, do you know what?
They're not supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. But they're supposed to surround themselves with the people that can help with those aspects. So actually, as a CEO or as a leader, if you don't have those answers, you should have a team that surrounds you that can answer those things. And they go, do you know what, Nicole, or whoever you're talking to, I don't know those, but I'm going to introduce your connect you with X who's going to be able to answer those questions. I'm going to make sure that they do answer those questions for you, and so that you can have a really deep conversation with them. So again, I think that goes to kind of hierarchy and structure of allowing and acceptance. And if it's kind of an order as such from the top, then people have got to kind of jump in line and help achieve this, or what's in it for them as well.
It almost sounds like a CEO is willing to do that, also needs to play a champion role on your behalf. Because it's one thing to say, you need to go and spend time with Nicole, but that champion role is actually a bit much more strategic in terms of relationships. What would that look like? How would you team up with a senior executive in that capacity?
Definitely, great question. I think it kind of goes back to those human behaviors, right? So, I've talked to X, and they recommend that I talk to you now on some of these aspects, and what I need is your help. And as a human being, we naturally want to help each other. So if you use words like, I need your help to understand what the challenges are that you're facing at the moment, and how I can help you achieve some of those things, or combat some of those challenges and help move things forward. If you, I think, offer that up and allow that space to really say, well, do you know what, the CEO may have said this was the challenge when actually it's X. You create that space and that opportunity to really talk about what matters and help drive things forward, because you may think it's one thing, but actually it's something completely different. So if you're looking at financial services and audit, it may not be risk and deadline and doing things right. It's actually people are working really long hours and they're not having enough time to sleep or downtime, so that mistakes are being made. So what needs to be done to help mitigate and make sure that mistakes aren't made? Actually look at it from the human perspective. You need rest, you need time off, time to sleep. We're talking about basic human needs and behaviours here, so that you can perform not just at the level you're expected to, but that you need to, and really to that self-actualization piece, to go above and beyond that.
Yeah, and that has a huge impact on retention and employee engagement, etc.
Burnout,
it's all connected.
You name it.
Yeah. Now, we're both involved with organizations that are sometimes have over 150 nationalities working for them. They're sometimes in over 100 countries, etc. We alluded to it in the previous episode. This, that intercultural agility is something on the sidelines, or it's a nice thing to have, but we both know, in our conversation brings it to the surface, that skill set that comes with intercultural agility is crucial from the beginning. So when you think about the conversation you just had with your CEO and with other people in the organization, what is important about intercultural agility? How would you bake it in?
I think I would flip that back to the CEO, for instance, and say, what is the risk of not having an interculturally agile team or leadership team or company? And get them to verbalize and think about that. And they go, and hopefully you would hope that they'd have that awareness and that reflection to go, oh my gosh, this is so important. Because if we do not flex our style and our understanding and how we approach different customers, then we're just going to lose trust and lose those customers. So actually it's flipping it to reverse it to understand it. I think that's how I'd get them to challenge and come around.
So they start to own it as well.
Exactly, because you can tell as much as you want or say how important it is, but until you get, and that's kind of coaching as well, until you get them to understand and reflect and to have those insights and what it means to them, and they see how important it is, I don't think you're really going to have that change or the immediacy for the change to happen.
Also, on the one hand, I think that's a good strategy. On the other hand, also for our listeners, what are some of those ingredients that build intercultural agility?
there's so many different ingredients to look at, right? I think.
Well, you think about our perception management toolbox, the 3 colors of worldview, 12 dimensions. But what are some of those ingredients that you need to bake in if you want to achieve that?
I want to flip that back to you and see what you think as well, because I've got my own ideas as well. But actually, you've just brought up some really interesting techniques and tools there as well. So from your perspective, what do you think those ingredients are as well? Yeah,
so, you mentioned about listening and understanding and not having just one size fits all when it comes to client engagement or engagement with your employees or your colleagues. So where we often start is with perceiving, and often the way you perceive yourself, the other, the relationship, the context, that is fine-tuned in the context where you came from, or in the context where you sort of can predict people's behavior. But now you work in an international setting, or you actually relocated. Either virtually your job is relocated, or physically you've relocated. And then all of a sudden, how you see yourself, how you see the other, how you gauge relationships, how you gauge the context, all of a sudden that skill set is not sufficient anymore. So seeing better, hearing better, you talked about listening, you talk interpreting. What does this actually mean? What does facial expression mean in this context? Or what does it mean that I felt I got a cold shoulder from my colleague when I suggested this idea? Is that rejection? Is there a political reason for it in the organization? Is it a cultural thing? So it's that learning to perceive better is where we typically start. Yeah. It sounds really simple, but it's also linked to, for instance, do I have a cultural learner's mindset? Or do I think that if people don't do it my way, then obviously I need to still educate them, which is part of the cultural critic mindset. Starting there is typically really helpful, and baking that in. And I still remember the first time I did this with a group of Australian executives, and I had put one of our perception management tools in the program, and I thought, well, these people are all global executives, and they've done this, in one way or another, many, many times over. And I did one activity called the DIR with them. And then I still remember one of the executives from a big pharmaceutical, he stood up and he said, wait a minute, before we go on, I need a lot more of this. I need a lot more of technique to slow down and really observe what's happening and gather the intel I need. So he asked on behalf of the group, does anybody feel we want to practice this more? And everybody said, yeah, we need this. And I was taken aback. I had to reshuffle my program, but of course, this is where the group was going. Yeah. So I facilitated into it. But that was the first time I realized, senior executives need this. They need to perceive better. Yeah. And so, starting with those tools, they're all simple tools.
Yeah. But isn't that wonderful? He took that opportunity to go, hold on a sec. Yeah. I'm willing to put himself forward to go, is this what you're saying? Yeah. Am I picking up what you're putting down? I'm willing to be vulnerable on behalf of everyone. Yeah. And understanding that your truth isn't necessarily someone else's truth or the whole truth.
Absolutely.
That is so important, isn't it? And you look at perspective. We've looked at images before of, like a car getting smashed up. And we're talking about interpretation, what's happening in this image. And if you just look at an image or the fact itself, there are so many different views or way that people see things. Yeah. That's maybe your truth or the story that you're telling, but it's not somebody else's or what's actually happening. Yeah. And it's like the words that we use as well. I've done this in a cultural awareness program years ago. It's a fantastic slide. And if anyone gets the opportunity to look this up, and I don't know if you've seen it, it's what the British say and what the Dutch interpret it means. Yeah. It's hilarious. Yeah. Or if the British say, oh, that's a really interesting idea. And Dutch person goes, they think my idea is really interesting. That is not what
the opposite.
It's the opposite. So what is the truth, or what are you picking up that somebody else is saying?
No, absolutely. And the other part to it is we often don't have the right language to analyze what's going on around us. So very often we say, you use the word interesting, as in a British way of saying, I don't really like that. Do I have the skill set to pick that up and to say, this might mean something else? So that's a tricky part. The other part is we use tools like the 3 colors of worldview and the 12 dimensions, and bringing that in early so that people start to say, this is how I can explain in a neutral language how I'm different as a cultural human being from you. And that's another part that we find with leadership development, to create that ability to analyze, but using a neutral language to analyze and understand the why behind somebody's behavior, somebody's thinking, acting. So that's another part. I think integrating that into leadership development is incredibly important.
And do you know what I also find astonishing? I think, especially being a parent as well. I'm designing, we're working together, we're designing these leadership development programs where, we're looking at intercultural agility. Sometimes this is the first time that adults are being introduced to this and ways of seeing the world. Yeah. So you really need to ask your question, the question of why don't people know about this, or where is the gap?
It starts early.
It does, doesn't it? Right? My kids are 9 and 10 at the moment. We're from the UK. We're living in the Middle East. They are third culture kids. Yeah. They live and breathe in an international school with everyone from Korea to Scotland, USA. There's so many different cultural lenses that people are bringing. But where there's a massive gap in I think, curriculums, and what we're missing every single country in the world at the moment is developing soft skills or people development skills and those intercultural nuance skills from an early age. If you look at curriculums, it's hard knowledge topics.
STEM
right?
is the core.
Exactly. Or history, maths, etc. It's only when you get to A-level, for instance, or when you're 16, 17, that you're looking at psychology. But again, that's more about how the brain works rather than how to develop communication skills or emotional intelligence. So it's only really when people are hitting the workplace, they're starting to learn about this. Yeah. So we really need to ask ourselves, at what point do we need to make that intervention? And it needs to be core as part of our little human beings learning, so that they become culturally and emotionally responsible people as they get older.
And that will have a huge impact when they finally then hit the workforce later on in life. Because we had the privilege of working with teenagers using our global leadership program for teenagers. And when you track with them, it's incredible. They are they enter into like university and then later into the workforce into such a different way. And it's exciting, but it's rare. Yeah. It's rare.
And it's going to take time.
It takes time.
That's not going to happen overnight. And if you're looking at, prep kids now, or, young kids that are in infant school.
At least we have kids at home where we could take ownership of that.
That is true. But then I think from our perspective, we're aware of those areas and nuances, and we can help teach our kids that. Yeah. But that's not the same of every parent.
No, it's not baked into the educational systems of the world.
And especially when you look at WhatsApp groups for schools with the parents on them, it's definitely not baked in. So there's a lot of professional development that we can help with. But I think we also need to think about how can we help influence this in a healthy manner to help every aspect of life going forward, because whether our kids go into politics or science or the arts, these skills are absolutely crucial regardless of industry.
Yeah, yesterday I was on a podcast for a school, and one of the students asked, so how is this going to help my teacher be a better teacher? I thought that was a great question because it's true. You know, if as a teacher you understand yourself, who you are culturally, how that projects into the classroom, the way you teach, the way you work with the kids, and how you transfer knowledge, but also help the kids to explore knowledge on their own terms. There's so many positive side effects.
Absolutely. And like we mentioned earlier, we're seeing this in geopolitics, right?
Absolutely.
The ability to communicate across countries and across the world with people that are different to yourself is so important. Otherwise, you're going to just come to loggerheads. So it's absolutely crucial, whether you're talking about tariffs, if you talk about immigration, that you can talk about it in a human manner that is respectful for everyone.
Yeah. That's great. Another topic that we could talk about for a long time. Yeah. If we go back to the world of work and obviously, so let's assume you have the opportunity to really connect strategy to L&D and L&D to strategy. Eventually, of course, people will get trained, coached, developed, but also you need to bring new people in. So how do you connect what's happening on the recruiting side and bringing new people in? How do you connect that to the work of L&D in HR?
That's a really great question. And I think, to be honest, I've seen such a disconnect in my career. When you look at HR, I think recruitment and learning and development are kind of almost two separate entities, right? They don't really work together, or the systems or the processes they have are completely different.
Yeah.
I think what I have seen that is done well on the hiring side is probably the technical capability of people, right? It's that first screening call, what knowledge and skills do people have in engineering or politics, right? What I don't see, and I haven't seen time and time again, is that behavioral assessment.
Yes.
What is this person like as a human being? How do they make decisions under stress or stressful situations? Because we can't avoid stress. We need to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And it can motivate you or it can distress you. So linking, what you only find out how these what people are like from a behavioral perspective maybe 2 or 3 months down the line,
typically
when they're already in the company. And at that point you go, oh my gosh, this is really bad, and you have to sometimes let these people go. So as a company, you've wasted time, you've wasted money and resources with hiring those people, and you've got to do that process all over again. Whereas if you mitigate that behavioral risk in the first place, and whether it's use some kind of assessment to show these are this person's strengths, these are some of the risk areas, you can then look at development pathways for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have seen some psychometrics or behavioral assessments done at some companies. But what I've not seen done properly is then that linkage of when you hire that person, how it's then handed over to the L&D team. And I go, great, welcome. Okay, so I've seen that you've done X assessment. What does that mean for you? And we can create then a customized learning pathway or development pathway, so we can take those, like Gallup, take those strengths from good to great, but also mitigate those risks and how we can develop them. That is really powerful, and I'm not seeing that done properly.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of working with companies who do that, and it makes such a huge difference. So whatever assessments used, when we recruit global leaders, we often do both cultural assessment as well as psychometric assessment. And in the cultural space, we have access to cultural competence assessments, global leadership competence. So gauging, okay, where are they at today, and do they have those skills at the right level for the role that we are hoping to recruit them into. But then to your point, once you have all that very rich data, especially with leaders, sometimes multiple assessments get used. Welcome to the company, and welcome to your personalized learning and development journey. Because that's where return on investment starts to kick in.
Absolutely. And I'd say it's not just, here's your personalized learning development journey. It'd be great if you had that. But actually, and I've seen this with senior partners, they're hiring the same type of people as well, right? So, so actually, if you think about team formation, actually, if you're hiring the same type of people in the same team, what are you expecting? If you're all quite dominant people and you're hiring dominant people going forward and they're not all on the same page in terms of results, potentially you're going to create friction and conflict in the future.
And you're going to drop balls because you don't have enough detail-oriented people on the board, or you don't have people who are focused on collaboration and strategic networking, etc.
And we know that the best teams are a balance of all those kind of different types of behaviours. But we know that from an internal perspective when we're looking at learning and development. But from a hiring perspective, if you're creating those permanent teams, I don't think that's really being looked at properly.
Yeah.
And it's so crucial for success of a company to look at what is this team going to look like.
Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind is the whole challenge. You mentioned, recruiting for specific behaviors. Learning how to ask the right questions is not easy. So the term behavioral interviewing is used quite frequently when they think about which behaviors are we looking for. But then I've also seen that the way you craft those behavioral interviewing questions don't always work in every part of the world or with every person from whatever cultural background. So we saw that, for instance, if you have deeply reflective behavioral interviewing questions, not every culture encourages deep reflection, for instance. Either it's done for you or the environment is such that you don't have time for it. So if it's a high-risk environment or a post-war environment, you don't do deep reflection. No. You just want to live. And we've seen that, for instance. So somebody would ask a question like, when is the last time when your boss asked you to do something that you, in essence, didn't agree with? How did you handle that situation? And were you able to raise that with your boss? And how did you do that? That is culturally an incredibly difficult question to ask. And I've seen it. I've seen people just dead silence. And they would say, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And then the candidate would say, I don't know what you mean. Can you give an example?
Yeah.
And if the interviewer then didn't have the intercultural agility, they would then give an example. And then a smart candidate would say, okay, now I know what you want. Yeah. Let me tell a story that is along the same lines of the example you just gave. Yeah. So behavioral interviewing, I'm a big fan of it, but it's also learning how to gather stories from the candidate so that those stories verify, yes, that's the behavior we're looking for in our organization. Yeah. The other thing I found, and this was fascinating, is that companies, of course, try to say, we are the best company to work for in the industry, come and work for us. And they'll typically have their talking points. And I had the privilege multiple times now where we work with organizations and we say, okay, let's look at your talking points. What are you trying to use to sell working for us is the best? And we use the 3 colors of worldview, for instance, to then assess, are you only saying we're the right company to work for? Or are you maybe also saying, if you work for us, it's prestige, it's honor, it's respect that you gain from it. Might even be with your family or people in your network. We are an honorable firm to work for within our segment of society or our industry. And the third element is, how much will I be empowered by my new employer to grow, to flourish, to develop, to have impact in the world, etc. And I found that quite a few, especially companies that were born in the West, for instance, they only say, we are the right company to work for. And all their talking points are along those lines. They don't know how to talk about honor, respect. They don't know how to talk about impact, influence, empowerment in the way they talk about their organization. And it's fun to then start playing with that and tweak sort of the messaging around recruiting and onboarding and to bring those 3 colors of worldview together.
Yeah. And just that story, it just shows you how vitally important talent acquisition and recruitment team are in terms of creating the culture of the company going forward. Because if they don't have that training on how to ask those types of questions, or when they do get the answers, they don't know how to interpret it, what's the point in doing it? So I think you've touched on something that's really important there. The type of culture that you want to create starts with your recruitment teams. But those recruitment teams also need to be at the table. Yeah. They need to be able to ask, what type of culture do we have? And what type of culture do you want to create to those leaders?
And how do we look for that in potential candidates? Yeah. Excellent. Well, let's get back to leadership, because we've already discussed in our last episode that disconnect where leadership programs are not connected to strategy, or where, it's a program from a very well-known name, and therefore it must magically work for us. How do you get to a point where, let's say, the program is well designed, but how do you get leaders, especially if you work with a very diverse group of leaders, how do you get leaders to not only go through the motion of the training or the coaching, but really to turn that around into value for themselves, for other leaders and peers, and for the organization? Because I find that culturally quite complex sometimes, but I know you've done that. We've been involved in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've seen this when also values have been rolled out, or updated values have been rolled out with companies. And I think you've got to have that opportunity to ask those leaders, or if it's senior partners that are sponsoring some of those values, how does this show up for you? What does it mean to you? If I ask the same question to a different leader or a different partner, I think they're going to say different things. I think it's really them talking about their experience of, well, what does this mean to me, and why is it important to me? Yeah. I think, like Simon Sinek, start with why. Go back to why. Why is this important? Yeah. What is my why? What is my purpose? And how does this align with it? And if it doesn't align, there's a real challenge there, right? Or how can I, if you're trying to make something align that doesn't culturally align with your values, it's probably never going to align as well. So I think that is a big reflection point for that leader itself.
That's a crucial starting point, Yeah, and the other thing I would say is once they then say, oh, okay, I'm committed, then to actually quantify real behavioral intentions. Yep. And finding a way for them to pursue those on their own terms, but also a culturally appropriate way to hold them accountable. I'm still learning so much in that space. So how do you take a multicultural group of leaders? They say, I want to do this, I want to do that. I see the light, so to speak. But then how do you hold them accountable in a culturally appropriate way?
I think that can be quite challenging. If I'm going to be honest, I've seen where leaders have taught the talk, but not walked the walk.
Yeah.
They'll say all the right things in a workshop, going, yeah, this is the right thing to do. Yeah, of course we want to do this. As soon as they walk out that room and they go back to their floor, their teams that they're working with.
And sometimes it's not even intentionally, because their lives are super busy.
Yeah, you revert to type.
You revert to type,
Yeah, you revert to your instinctive or cultural behaviours. Yeah. So I think that's where you've got to take it back to that real shift of why are you here? Again, as a leader, if you've just been told that you need to be here, okay? Yeah. But actually, how important is this? And trying to align it to their cultural perspective and how they see things. Get them to verbalize that. Then you've got them.
Yeah, I think also you mentioned in the first episode also the idea of coaching. So leaders as coaches. If these coaching, the coaching mindset, but also the coaching techniques, when they become part of leadership development, they're more likely to also be willing to be held accountable by peers. Yep. That's no matter what culture they come from.
Definitely. I think, however, though, if we're waiting until they are leaders or in a position of leadership,
so true,
it's too late.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
if you want to create a coaching culture, that's from graduate. You start at graduates all the way up to your senior leaders and partners, right? Yeah. And it's the ability to ask co-workers those coaching questions, and not to put yourself on a pedestal, but actually just helping to ask questions to get the other person to reflect and create insight. That's how you create a coaching culture. It's peer-to-peer, it's manager to junior, it's junior to manager. It's reverse coaching, or reverse mentoring as well. There's so many different aspects.
But that's often depending on the culture, the leadership culture, leadership followership culture that you are used to. That can be a hard nut to crack. I'll give you an example. I worked with a leader who he became, his last 2 promotions were because he was the expert, the technical expert in his field. And he actually enjoyed that juniors would come to him and say, I've got this and this dilemma, what do you think? And he would have the answer. And 99% of the cases, it was the correct answer, and they would all be very thankful. And then I ended up coaching him. And it had become something that started to consume his time. Because everybody around him knew the answer was available. And he was willing to spend the time and give the answer, and his peers or direct reports would say, we'll go to him if we have a question. And I had the privilege of working with him to turn that around, because culturally for him, that was a very important part of his position. Gave him prestige, gave him credibility, and in the cultural background he's from, that was elevated. But he got stuck as a result of it. And getting to the point where I said to him, I want to get to the point where you're willing to step into a meeting where you actually don't have an answer. And you are such a good coach that you can create the answer with the people involved. But culturally, it was counterculture for him. But once he got it, he got so much joy out of it, and it freed him up time-wise. Because people realized, I'm not going to go to him anymore because he's going to push it back on my plate with some very clever questions. And then I have to go and figure it out myself. I thought that was a classic example of, okay, my culture has taught me I need to be the guru, I need to be the expert, I need to be the person people go to for advice. And now I need to become the leader who actually can facilitate, can coach, can help others discover the way forward together.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there with kind of that mentoring versus coaching. Mentoring is telling people the answer, and it may not be the right answer or the right answer for them. But actually using coaching, and people think coaching takes a long time. You can actually coach.
Doesn't.
No, you can coach someone in 10 minutes or less. You go, well, actually, I've got some answers, but I want to hear what your ideas are first. Okay, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing? In terms of people, projects, and patterns, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing here? How can I help? And not by telling them the answer. Or they go, well, actually, I need to know X. And I was like, okay, great, we'll go do it. So actually, sometimes people just need the permission. But if you're asking questions and getting the other person to reflect, that's creating insight, and they are becoming the problem solver. Because if you are solving people's problems all the time, once you're out of the picture, you're gone for whatever reason, they need to be self-sufficient. So you're creating self-sufficiency in the future, and that's how you create leaders that are better able to create insight. And if they're asked those questions, that's got a knock-on and a ripple effect with how they manage and lead people.
And it brings me back to the Kotter's leadership pipeline. It talks about he has 7 layers. In some organizations have only 3 layers. But he talks about this idea that as a leader, I need to get these and these competencies and skills. And when I show those, when I have evidence that I am able to consistently apply those in the organization, then I might be ready for promotion. And what I found is to your point in the story I just shared, is actually interculturally, you need to go one step further. So it's not I've acquired the skill. I've acquired the skill and I've shown evidence that I've passed it on to somebody else. So that mentor/coach role, it takes it one step further. And I found that in intercultural teams, that makes leadership development more sustainable.
Yep.
But it also creates a healthier collaboration culture in the organization.
That's fun. Do you know what? I actually love that, because if you look at performance management and year end, a lot of the time you have to prove that you have done X, Y, Z, but there's not always that proof of knowledge transfer. And if you look at succession planning and high potential, it's all down to that. Yeah. So actually, how can you evidence and track that evidence that you have passed on that knowledge and you are developing that next leadership team or whatever's coming up? So a certain portion of your time as a leader needs to be developing others.
Yeah, I was talking to a client, family-owned business, from more of an honor-shame cultural background. And the CEO explained it really nicely. He said, well, if I get elevated, there's a gap. How do we fill the gap?
Yep.
I need to pull people up with me.
Yep.
And they're not going to go there unless I've transferred skills, knowledge, insights, history of the business, etc. So pulling myself up is one thing. I can do that.
Yep.
But I have to think about, okay, what happens underneath me? How do I pull other people up? And how do they pull the people beneath them up? So, and especially because in a family-owned business, they were saying, we need to develop leaders from within.
Yeah.
Because family-owned business culture is so unique sometimes, and it needs to be closely connected to the DNA of the business family.
Yeah.
But I thought that was beautiful, create that gap. Who's responsible for that gap? Well, if I want a promotion, I need to take ownership of that gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make sure it gets filled.
And I think if we go back to the question of, well, where does it start? If you're a CEO and you're listening to this right now, it starts with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Get an executive coach or someone that can help create insight or just create that space for you to reflect, because then you're going to see the value in it. And then you can then pass that gift onto your next line of leaders and then on and then on. Yeah. So help create that insight. People see how useful it is, and then you can start developing those skills internally. Yeah. So you've got that ripple effect.
Awesome. Well, I think that makes it for a good closing comment there. I think we've touched on a lot of things. I think as we were discussing, I also realized it is complex, but there are ways to craft a future, to craft a good L&D strategy. There are ways to craft good development strategies for leaders, to improve the onboarding, recruiting and onboarding process. So how can people get in contact with you?
Fantastic. They can get in contact with you first.
As well.
As a Knowledge Works partner, or through the Create Space group. So I've got my website and on LinkedIn as well. Yeah. But it starts today. If people think it's too late to change, it's not. Regardless of where you are in a company, you can create change starting from today. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot again today, and thank you for this conversation. Likewise. Thanks, Marco. And we'll put your contact details, our contact details in the notes so people can find us. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. As we wrap up this two-part series with Nicole, one insight emerges clearly. Organizations invest heavily in L&D and leadership programs, yet true behavioral change often stalls in multicultural teams. Not due to a lack of intent, but because of subtle dynamics like unseen cultural assumptions, gaps in people's skills, hierarchical barriers, and global one-size-fits-all strategies overlooking intercultural nuances in hiring, coaching, and alignment. We've mapped out actionable steps. CEOs championing L&D access, behavioral assessments tied to recruiting, co-creating values, and coaching cultures that foster innovation and collaboration. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a colleague or leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps others discover the show. You can also find additional resources, articles, and information about our certifications at knowledgeworks.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you with us again on the next episode of Unlocking Intercultural Agility.